Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard exposing the deep state, declassifying a 2020 House Intel report on the Russian collusion hoax, and says the Obama administration tried to undermine Trump and the voters in 2016.
There is irrefutable evidence that detail how President Obama and his national security team directed the creation of an intelligence community assessment that they knew was false. They manufactured findings from shoddy sources. They suppressed evidence and credible intelligence that disproved their false claims. They disobeyed traditional tradecraft intelligence community standards and withheld the truth from the American people. In doing so, they conspired to subvert the will of the American people who elected Donald Trump in that election in November of 2016. They worked with their partners in the media to promote this lie, ultimately to undermine the legitimacy of President Trump.
So here are the three biggest takeaways from today's presser and the release. First, President Obama and top members of his administration claimed Vladimir Putin and the Russian government helped Trump win the 2016 election.
The intelligence that I've seen gives me great confidence in their assessment that the Russians carried out this hack. What I want to make sure of is that I give the intelligence community the chance to gather all the information, but I'd make a larger point, which is not much happens in Russia without Vladimir Putin. We have said, and I will confirm, that this happened at the highest levels of the Russian government.
Really? The CIA analyst told then Director John Brennan, quote, "We don't have direct information that Vladimir Putin wanted to get Trump elected." President's had something different to say there. Then there's the claim the Steele dossier was not used as a source in the 2017 Obama Intel Community Assessment.
I had heard just snippets about it. I did not know what was in there. I did not see it until later in that year. I think it was in December. But I was unaware of the provenance of it as well as what was in it. And it did not play any role whatsoever in the intelligence community assessment that was done, that was presented to then President Obama and then President-elect Trump.
Well, he did have a different take. Now, according to Director Gabbard, not only did Brennan, FBI Director Comey, DNI Clapper, and others include the Steele dossier in the assessment, they overruled senior intel officials who warned them it was fabricated. Was he saying something different on NBC? Then there's the claim the assessment was an independent intelligence community product, produced only with apolitical analysis. Really? Tulsi Gabbard pouring cold water on that, saying this: Obama ordered the intel community to create an intelligence community assessment they knew was false, promoting a contrived narrative. So, will any criminal charges come from this?
Do you believe that any of this new information implicates former President Obama in criminal behavior?
We have referred and will continue to refer all of these documents to the Department of Justice and the FBI. To investigate the criminal implications of this.
For even former President Obama?
Correct. The evidence that we have found and that we have released directly point to President Obama leading the manufacturing of this intelligence assessment.
So here to unpack all of this, investigative journalist Matt Taibbi. Matt, what's your takeaway from what we know so far, and more paperwork is coming?
Well, the big thing is that what Tulsi just said in that press conference is very significant, because the big mystery behind the story that's remaining is what kind of case are they trying to build. We've been told that it's a conspiracy case, but we don't know conspiracy to do what. And her answer there, saying that they have concrete evidence that Obama directed the manufacturing of this report and the manufacturing of this intelligence, suggests that there's a conspiracy to do something that he is at the head of. So I think that's a very significant answer she just gave there to Emily Jashinsky.
And Matt, it's pretty clear. There's two stories, and it's easy to get them intersected. There's what did the Russians try to do? Yeah, well, as early as 2014, we were looking what the Russians were trying to do with their elections. Were they successful in hacking voting machines? They weren't. But what they tried to do, for different from September to December, is link the Trump campaign to what Russia was doing, established collusion, and the result was try to delegitimize President Trump's astounding victory. And that's where the rubber hits the road on this story.
Yeah, so this is, it's been frustrating watching some of the coverage, what little coverage there's been in the old mainstream media. They keep saying it's an apples and oranges story. This is very narrowly focused on one issue, which is how did the intelligence community come to the conclusion not only that that Vladimir Putin and Russia were trying to meddle in the election, but that they were doing it for Donald Trump. And this is the thing that's at the heart of this intelligence community assessment. It's why Obama ordered a new one on December 9th of 2016. And we find out in the thing that's released today that the entire conclusion that Putin, quote unquote, aspired to help Trump, for whom he had a clear preference, was based on 4 pieces of evidence, one of which was a Steele dossier, and the other 3 were discarded, rejected pieces of non-information, what somebody called manipulated manipulations to me, including an anonymous blank email with no address or recipient. There's nothing there. There's no there. There is literally zero evidence for their contention, and it's pretty shocking.
It's shocking in a couple of things. Some lives are ruined. You know, George Papadopoulos, a minor player, goes to jail. He becomes famous for the wrong reasons. Carter Page, a minor player with the Trump team, even though he was an intelligence asset, he has his life ruined for the next 2.5 years. Paul Manafort was in solitary confinement. This is all trumped up to establish a collusion that didn't exist. Does it remind you of anything that you've covered in the past?
Well, certainly it has a lot of similarities to the WMD story, and interestingly includes some of the same players. James Clapper, who's the director of national intelligence under Barack Obama in this story, he was in charge of imagery analysis in the WMD story, and he later wrote in his book that he was guilty of finding things that weren't there for the WMD story, and that's exactly what happened in this case. These intelligence leaders ordered their subordinates to essentially find the WMDs. It's the same thing, except they were looking for links to Russia, and they didn't have any usable intelligence. They had to go back and find discarded, already rejected intelligence to put in there. That and the Steele dossier. That's all they had.
It is. And then I think about you going through the Twitter files, finding out what was going on behind the scenes with the intelligence community, pressuring these social media companies to shadow ban, suspend certain accounts, and trying to intimidate them. And I think about your coverage of the laptop story when the FBI basically got mad at the guy who gave him the laptop instead of trying to find out whose laptop it was. Matt, thanks so much for doing this. Appreciate it.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.